All right, it is currently 1:34 a.m. Pacific time. I'm here in California. It is just now November 6th, the day after the election, early morning after the election. And the Democrats have lost. Donald Trump won decisively. And I don't really know what to say about it. I wanted to say something. I feel the need to share some thoughts. I don't want this to be too much doom and gloom, because that's the obvious reaction for anyone who's left-leaning. Certainly for me, I've been consistent in my opposition of Trump and Trump-like politics. And we have to be realistic with ourselves that what we are seeing here is a complete cultural victory for Trumpian politics and for Trump himself. And we are almost certainly, pretty much certainly, going to see a government that is entirely controlled by Republicans. So that's the three branches of government, like all three of them, including the Supreme Court, which is, ideally a non-political entity, but that is obviously no longer the case, and we are now going to have a Senate and a House. I don't think the House has quite been called yet. I saw somebody say that the House might go to the Dems or is predicted to go to the Dems. I don't know about all that. But as of right now, I'm preparing myself and accepting the fact that Republicans are going to be fully in control of the government. I mean, even if Democrats keep the House, it's inconsequential. Democrats or Republicans are going to be able to do most of everything that they want to do, just with the Senate and the presidency and the Supreme Court. So, my thoughts on this are complicated. I haven't worked through all of them yet. We obviously don't have all the data. We don't know exactly what happened here with the electorate, but it's very clear that many groups of voters have moved to the right. Almost the entire electorate, at least all the parts of the electorate that really mattered here, have moved to the right. In the course of this sort of Trump era, starting in 2016 and including the Biden administration, we have seen a steady move to the right, a jarring move to the right in this country. And the only way to survive the next 4 to 8 to however many years is to accept that. We live in a right-wing country now. Doesn't mean that there's no room for progressive policy, progressive advocacy. Obviously, you have many things going on at the state level. Those battles are going to continue. Things don't look great at the state level either, but maybe not as bleak as they are on the national level. And so I think what I'm going to do with this podcast and in general is, at least when it comes to politics, because I don't want to only talk politics on this podcast. It's obviously a big part of what's important to me, but I also enjoy cultural commentary in general. I want to have fun here. And politically, for people who are left of center like myself, it doesn't look like it's going to be a very fun time for at least the next 4 years. Hard to even imagine where this country is going to be in 4 years, including what any type of election is going to look like in 4 years. So that's where things are at. And I think what I'm going to dive into is, how to organize effectively on the local basis, because that's really all we have at this point. I mean, it was one thing when Republicans won the trifecta in 2016, the first time. This was sort of a new thing that seemed to be happening with Trump-era politics. There was a sense that it could be pushed back upon effectively, or even that the moral sense of Republicans could be appealed to. All of that is out the window. And even when it comes to many, if not most or all of the voters that voted Donald Trump in this time, the idea of appealing to these people based on the obvious amoral nature of Trump's politics, it just seems like it's out the window. There is nothing that has been done more than trying to hammer home the ills and the disgusting nature of who Donald Trump is. The media has done it consistently. Over the last 4 years, some people have argued that the media has moved more to the right or has tried to play nice with some of these Republican policies and rhetoric and treating straight up lies as if they are opinions, etc. Sort of treating Republican politics and politicians with kid gloves. But the reality is, the way I see it, is that the more people have pushed back on Trump, the more we call him a fascist, the more we call him a rapist, a racist, all of these things that he is, the more we emphasize that he's a criminal and attempt to hold him accountable for his crimes. All of these things just seem to have pushed people closer to Donald Trump. All of the hammering home how dangerous Donald Trump is for immigrants, what he plans to do to immigrant communities, in his own words, mass deportation. You know, he has gained ground in all of these demographics. And it looks like the main demographic where he's not gained as much ground as they kind of were expecting was with black males. And there's still some movement to the right there, definitely some movement in Trump's favor there, but mostly we're seeing it with Latinos. We're certainly seeing it with young men, obviously young white men. Gen X was a sizable part of this electorate that has elected Donald Trump as well. And so we have to accept that Trumpian politics has worked on America. It's worked. The goal was to normalize Trump for the purpose of normalizing the most extreme form of Republican and right-wing politics. And it worked. And there are many, many people in this country who see no issue with Donald Trump or any of the things that he has said and done. I don't know how to reconcile that. It makes me feel quite dissociative in terms of just the change that we're experiencing in this country. But we're not going to get anywhere by refusing to acknowledge that change. And rhetorically, in terms of what the strategy should be going forward for left-leaning policy, I don't know what that means. I mean, I don't think that not resisting Donald Trump is an option. Meaning, you know, he has to be resisted. Trump's policies, his ideas, his concept of governance has to be resisted. But I also don't know what that looks like in a nation where he controls all of the branches of the federal government. What does meaningful resistance under those conditions look like? I guess we're going to find out. There are some people on the left who have theorized over the last 8 years that Donald Trump makes it easier to organize and creates the conditions through which real uprisings can happen, which is what happened in 2020 during the Black Lives Matter protests, obviously because of other things that were out of Donald Trump's control, but there's no question that his method of governance also paved the way for that type of resistance, not to mention January 6th, not to mention the obvious police brutality that's still a problem in this country and is only poised to get worse under Donald Trump. So the point is, it's going to happen locally. The resistance against this has to happen locally. That is how Republicans have made the gains that they've made. They've made it through propaganda on social media and identifying emotional vectors through which to communicate to people that they can take root, you know, planting seeds in people's minds based on emotion, feelings that take root and lead to a larger network, a neural network in people's minds that is very, very hard to break through from the opposite perspective politically. And conservatives have done this extremely effectively. I mentioned in one of the previous episodes the Koch brothers network and how they figured out how to essentially spread their ideology as far and wide as possible by doing just that, by planting seeds, finding places that they could get a foothold in the culture and being relentless about it. And these are billionaires. These are people who have billions of dollars to spend and lose. But the return that they get for spending that money is the election of a person like Donald Trump, who will shamelessly reward them with tax cuts. And so it's important for us to recognize not just the total cultural victory at the moment of Donald Trump, but of the cultural victory of conservatism. 100% cultural victory as of 2024. This propaganda that they are shoving into people's heads about trans people, immigrants, left-wing policy in general. Do I believe that all of the voters who broke for Trump in this election agree with that? That they hate left-wing policy, that they think left-wing policy and leftists are evil enemies within? No, I think most of them probably don't believe that. I think what we see with Donald Trump is a man who's extremely effective at projecting images out into the world. And these images don't have to be very concrete. We're not talking about policy proposals. We're not talking about a plan or any type of firm stance even. What we're talking about is an emotional impression that Donald Trump and his systems of propaganda are able to very effectively deliver to people. The idea that he is a strong leader, the idea that America is safer from global conflict under his reign, the idea that Donald Trump is masculine and promotes a kind of masculinity that is good for men in this country. A basic understanding of any kind of facts makes it very obvious that these things are not true. Anybody who has a basic understanding of facts knows that these images of Donald Trump are false. But it doesn't matter because people don't trust the media. They don't trust the systems, the communication systems that have been tasked with communicating to them why Donald Trump is bad, why we should vote for anybody else other than Donald Trump. People don't buy it. So they hear all this stuff, all this hyper-specific information about Donald Trump referencing fascists, taking notes from fascists, purposely delivering on fascist proposals and policies, and just a litany of other, personal quibbles, the fact that he's held liable for sexual assault and stealing documents from the government. All this stuff is hyper-specific. It's all readily available all the time to everyone. We've all seen it. And yet, people dismiss all of that whole cloth because Donald Trump is able to essentially deliver them an image that's more favorable than that they like more than that. And so once those seeds that are planted through propaganda, the emotional seeds of trans people trying to take away the innocence of your children, or Democrats want to take away your guns, or Democrats have ruined the economy, or Democrats are socialists. These seeds are placed in these people's minds and they grow naturally rather than a sort of constant reminder of what you could say the elite or the media class wants people to believe. We are constantly reminded of what the media class believes we should believe. In most cases, I agree with them, but it is undeniable, absolutely undisputable at this point, that those methods of communication, whether it's cable news or the Democratic Party or other grassroots methods of getting information out to Democratic voters and trying to bring people out and trying to turn over voters, it's completely ineffective. But what is effective is planting these emotional seeds in people's minds, finding the fertile ground, finding people where they are that are ready to hear this message, planting the seed and allowing it to grow. You allow people to come to the conclusions on their own. And so when people have an image of Donald Trump as a strong leader or a no-nonsense businessman or whatever it is, That seed is planted. And then all of the negative agitprop against him, constant barrage, people constant reminded, stole the election, found liable for rape, convicted felon, 34 felonies, constant. But they take ownership of the feeling that they get from the more emotional based propaganda. And that is the craft, that is the method that conservatives have perfected, not just over the course of the last 8 years, but I would say over the course of the last 50 years, at very least. It's been a steady effort to find the best ways to emotionally engage with Americans on an individual basis so that they will come to the conclusions that conservative elites want them to come to. They will come to the conclusions on their own, and therefore they take ownership of those ideas. They don't feel like those ideas are being fed to them by the mainstream media, but rather they feel rebellious. They feel that they are onto the truth by voting for Donald Trump, because they feel like the mainstream media wants them to believe something, and if they want you to believe something so bad, they must be lying to you. And it's entirely possible that the thing that we don't understand as left-leaning, even center-leaning, some right-leaning people that hate Donald Trump, it's entirely possible that what we don't understand is that Donald Trump doesn't force them to believe what he wants them to believe. He projects the image out, and it's an attractive image to some people. And so when that image that he projects of himself, and it's different, everybody who voted for Donald Trump on November 5th, 2024, has a different impression in their mind of who and what Donald Trump is. He's open and up to interpretation. And I think that is how Donald Trump has been able to drag this country to the right. It's not because of policy. It's not because right-wing policy is popular. It's because Donald Trump is able to connect with many voters on many different emotional bases. And this allows for them to build a relationship with Donald Trump subconsciously of their own. And that's why it's so hard to break through to them. That's why it's so hard to talk to them. We're talking about emotions here. Democrats did not lose this election because of their command of the facts. They did not lose this election because their policy is worse. I don't even think they lost the election because of the economy. Even though the economy is part of it, people are struggling. It's entirely possible Democrats didn't do enough to address that. Donald Trump took advantage of the age-old pattern that when the economy's bad, the incumbent president tends to take the blame for that, and they lose. It even happened to him. But he was in the advantageous position this time, and it looks like Kamala Harris was a weaker and more vulnerable candidate than we realized. But what it comes down to is that most of these voters who voted for Donald Trump, I don't believe they decided last minute. But if they did, in the cases that they did, it's because of emotional seeds that were planted a long time ago. And this is the case in 2016 as well, by the way. Donald Trump did the same thing then. He was seizing on emotions that people had already had for a long time. And now those same emotions exist. They've developed further, except now you have associations with Donald Trump that are wrapped up in that. Most of these voters who voted for him, they know. They know it's true that he's a sex criminal. They know it's true that he's a maniac. They know it's true that he kind of wants to be a dictator in some form. But ultimately, for some reason, the image that he projects inspires them. It stirs feelings within them that they prefer to the feelings that are stirred within them by Democrats. So, you're going to hear a lot of people saying going forward that we need to focus on community, showing up for our neighbors, being there for each other. All of that is true. I personally don't know how much more I can take being plugged into federal politics, national politics at this point. I mean, for the next 4 years, things are bleak. And now you never know. You never know. Things could happen in a way that the political landscape changes dramatically. I mean, COVID-19 happened. That was an enormous shift in politics that led to some of the most progressive and quick acting decisions by Congress and the presidency that we've ever seen, including stimulus checks going out to people. And guess what? The politician who was on the Republican side the most open to making that happen, because he was the least tethered to traditional conservative ideology, was Donald Trump. Donald Trump knew that that would benefit him. He did not care that it is fundamentally opposed to conservative ideology to just issue checks to citizens. He knew that the Republican Party probably wouldn't do that unless he got behind it, but he also knew that it would help him get elected. The trip, it didn't help him get elected in 2020. It did help him get elected in 2024. People remember that. So, what I'm saying here is not that Donald Trump can be appealed to on the basis of generous or any form of socialist policy. Although if he can come by it in some way that benefits him, I think he'll be open to it. He has shown that in the past. I think on Donald Trump's priorities like immigration and mass deportation and abortion, he's going to be ruthless. When it comes to certain types of economic policy, there may be room for, I guess, certain policy victories that we wouldn't expect from Republicans. So to me, the strategy, rather than constantly positioning ourselves against Trump and Trump supporters, I think that strategy is dead, guys. I think the strategy of trying to argue with our neighbors and our loved ones and our friends, trying to get them to see how sick it is that they have been fooled by this person, I think it's over. I think that this election is a vindication of Donald Trump's con man style of politics. It works. People like it. I think the only thing that we can do now is stake out our positions. What are the things you care about? Abortion rights, healthcare, minimum wage, universal basic income. All of these things, all of these policies still have potential to come to bore in America. The only way that we're going to do it is by, and I hate to say it, following the lead of the conservative ideological leaders of the last century leading into this century, which is you stake out your position, you hold fast, and you repeat yourself over and over and over again. Bernie Sanders understood this. He understood that if you repeat the message, Medicare for all, billionaires 1%, billionaires 1%, you repeat the message. And you do it in a way that you're not trying to hold people's hand to come to the conclusion that you want them to. You put the ideas out there. You find the people who are susceptible, the people who are going to receive the message that you want to grow, and you put the message out there towards them. You don't force it down their throat. Maybe you don't even try to convince them, but you stake out your position and you stand by it. And that's what we're going to have to do, because we're looking at an electorate that has changed in a direction that I don't think any of us expected. I don't think the Republicans expected this. I think that this is again a cultural victory that is way more successful than they would have expected themselves to be. And so things are going to get confusing ideologically. You know, this country is going to become a hostile environment when it comes to any kind of left-wing ideas. That's just the fact of the matter. So we have to figure out how to continue projecting strength and empathy and good policy in a hostile environment in a way that ideally over time can take root in some of these people's minds. Leftists in general, as a general denotation, believe that people's voting tendencies is based on their material conditions and not the state of their souls or whether they're a good or bad person. People's susceptibility, specifically to right-wing reactionary ideas, is based on their situation economically, their material reality. Democrats have utterly failed to put up any kind of political strategy that effectively acknowledges this reality. If people are struggling, you can reach out to those people. You can gain their support, but they have to believe that you're going to help them. And the truth is, maybe one of the few things that we can learn from Trump politics is that the specifics don't matter that much. What matters is that they have to believe you, or even if they don't, they have to feel like they're coming by these conclusions on their own, honestly. You have to give people the ideas, you have to plant the seeds, and you have to allow them to come to the conclusions that will lead to the policies, that will lead to the representatives that we want. I think that's all I have to say right now. Don't despair. Things are going to get weird in this country. Focus on what's around you. Focus on the people around you that you can organize with. Now's a great time to try to think of clever ways and methods of organizing. So I think we need to focus on that. We need to take some deep breaths. And we need to keep fighting. Keep fighting another day. This is bleak, but there's nothing else to do but stake out our positions and be consistent. And hopefully try to see a resurgence of some of the ideas that we want to take hold in American politics. Democratic representatives seem to be rather useless. So I think we need to focus more on the policies that we like. We need to focus more on rhetoric that works. And ultimately, we need to stay true to our principles and who we are and never waver and let the cards fall where they may.